It was one of those nights, the kind where the road feels longer than it should, and the silence in the car presses down on you. The dashboard clock read 11:23 p.m. I was already 2 hours behind schedule, and my eyelids were getting heavy. I had stayed late at the office, finishing reports my boss had dumped on me last minute. Typical. The highway stretched out endlessly, a dull gray ribbon under my headlights, and I swear the traffic was crawling slower than molasses in winter. That's when I remembered an old back road through the Cascade Range. I'd taken it once before with my buddy Greg on a camping trip. Twisty, narrow, but a hell of a lot quicker. Plus, it cut through the thick pines and had this eerie, peaceful vibe at night. No traffic, no noise, just the road and the trees. I figured, why not? So I veered off the highway, my tires crunching gravel as I merged onto the old forest route. The trees swallowed the car in darkness almost immediately. My high beams cut through the thick, syrupy blackness, illuminating the tall, jagged silhouettes of pines crowding the road. The air smelled damp and earthy, and the rhythmic hum of my tires over cracked asphalt was almost hypnotic. I rolled down the window slightly, letting the cool, pine-scented air wash over me. For a moment, it felt peaceful. Just me in the night, but peace never lasts, does it? I felt it before I heard it. The sudden sluggish pull of the wheel, the car wobbling like a drunk on a tightrope. Then, thunk, thunk, thunk. That sickening, rhythmic slap of rubber flapping on pavement. Damn it, I muttered, my stomach nodding. Flat tire. Perfect. I eased the car onto the narrow shoulder, my headlights bathing the tall trees in an eerie, pale glow. The forest around me was still... too still. I killed the engine and the silence rushed in, thick and oppressive. There were no sounds. No crickets, no wind rustling the leaves, just a hollow, expectant quiet. I popped the trunk, grabbed the jack and spare, and got to work. The ground was damp and the cold seeped through my jeans as I knelt. My fingers fumbled with the lug nuts, slick with sweat despite the chill. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps crunching leaves somewhere to my left. Slow, deliberate. I froze, my hand tightening on the jack handle. My pulse thudded loud enough to drown out the silence. I told myself it was just a deer, maybe a raccoon, but deep down I knew better. Then came the voice. Hey there, buddy. Need a hand? I jolted upright, my heart nearly stopping. Two men stood just beyond the beam of my headlights, their forms half swallowed by shadows. Where the hell had they come from? There was no car, no flashlights, just them. The man who spoke was tall and wiry, his face gaunt and lined. He wore a faded flannel jacket, the kind you'd find in a thrift store, and his eyes, there was something off about them. Too still, too cold. His companion was shorter, stockier, his face half done beneath the brim of a tattered baseball cap. I swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile. No, I got it, thanks, just a flat. The taller one took a step forward, his boots scuffing the pavement. Sure, we're pretty good with cars. His voice was slow, almost rehearsed, like he'd said those words 100 times before. No, really, I said quickly, my throat dry. I'm good, appreciate it though. The second man spoke then, his voice a rough gravel scrape. It's dangerous out here, you know, a lot of accidents on these roads. I felt my stomach knot tighter. The way he said it, flat, emotionless, wasn't a warning. It was something else. A promise, maybe. My eyes flicked down, and that's when I saw it. A bulge beneath the taller man's jacket. Too big to be a phone. My blood ran cold. Yeah, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. I'll just get this done quick and be on my way. I turned back to the tire, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to do something. I could feel their eyes on my back, the weight of their stares heavy and patient. My hands shook as I twisted the last lug nut free. I kept my voice light, casual. You guys from around here? There was a pause, a beat too long. Then the tall one chuckled. Yeah, you could say we know these parts real well. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I didn't need to see their faces to know they were smiling. I couldn't do this. I couldn't stand here, helpless, and wait for whatever was coming. So I made a choice. With a sudden, wild movement, I grabbed the spare tire and hurled it into the trunk. I didn't bother securing it. I didn't care. My hand slammed the trunk shut and I spun to the driver's seat. I felt them move, heard the scrape of boots on asphalt. "Hey!" one of them barked, his voice sharp now, the false friendliness gone. My body moved on instinct. I dove into the car, my hand fumbling for the keys. A hand slapped against the window, a flash of flannel, a pale face, wide eyes. I turned the key, the engine roared. The taller man's mouth twisted into something that wasn't a smile, too wide, too knowing. And then, in a voice that sliced through the glass, he said, "You shoulda let us help." I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, the tires squealing as they bit into the asphalt. My heart pounded, adrenaline flooding every inch of me. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing in the headlights, their faces pale and unnatural in the glow. The shorter man shifted forward, like he was about to give chase. On foot, but he didn't run. He just smiled. That same wide, knowing grin. And then he raised a hand. Not a wave, a gesture, a promise. The road twisted ahead, but my eyes stayed glued to the mirror. And in the moment before I lost them to the night, I saw something that froze my blood cold. The tall man wasn't looking at my car. He was looking past it, like he was watching something else. Something behind me. The curve came up fast. I swerved hard, my tires screaming as I fought to keep control. For a second, I thought I was going off the road, but the car gripped and I shot forward into the darkness. I didn't stop, not until I hit the main road, bright with the occasional headlights of passing cars. Only then did I dare look behind me. There was nothing. No car, no men, just the endless, black mouth of the forest. I drove straight home, my knuckles white on the wheel, my pulse thundering. I locked every door, every window, and sat in the dark with my back to the wall, listening for anything at all. But the house was silent. Still, sleep didn't come. They say you never forget the first time you feel truly hunted. I thought about that a lot after I heard James's story. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since college. But when his post popped up on social media, I clicked out of curiosity. I expected pictures of his new house or maybe a family update. What I didn't expect was a frantic, rambling account of his drive through the Cascades, the flat tire, the two men, and that smile he saw in his rearview mirror. I reread his words twice, the icy knot in my stomach tightening each time. Not because I doubted him, hell, I believed every word, but because it stirred something I had been trying to forget, something I had buried under time and silence. It was supposed to be just a trip for photos, a peaceful day in the woods. But James's story made me realize sometimes the forest watches back. I remember the air was crisp that morning, the kind that bites your cheeks and turns your breath to fog. Arkansas autumns had a way of making the trees burn with color, deep golds, fiery reds, and soft coppers that shimmered when the wind hit just right. That's why I was out there, deep in the Ouachita National Forest. The trees were showing off, and my camera was itching to capture it. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going. Maybe that was my first mistake. But I'd done this plenty of times. Off-trail, alone, chasing the perfect shot. I didn't see the danger in it. Why would I? The forest smelled like earth and fallen leaves, and the only sounds were the distant rustling of branches and the occasional caw of a crow. I walked deeper, boots crunching softly on the mossy ground, my eyes sweeping for a perfect frame. The sunlight poured through the trees in shafts, painting the forest floor in gold and shadow. I was in the zone, completely lost in my lens, when I noticed something, a subtle break in the pattern of trees ahead. The ground dipped slightly into a clearing, the grass there oddly flattened. I stepped forward, camera raised, ready to capture the contrast of light and wild earth. That's when I saw him, a figure just beyond the tree line, half shrouded in shadow. My first thought was, another hiker? But he wasn't moving like a hiker. His steps were slow and heavy, his boots dragging against the earth. His clothes were dark, worn, like they had lived too many days out here. And he was pulling something behind him, a bag, long, wrapped in tarp, and heavy, so heavy that it left a deep, broken trail through the leaves. I froze, my finger still on the shutter, and the camera clicked, Once, twice, as my pulse began to climb. Then he stopped. For a breathless second, I prayed he hadn't heard the camera. But as if the air itself had shifted, his head turned, slowly, directly, and he saw me. My chest tightened so fast it felt like I'd been punched. I couldn't see his face, just the shadowed hollow beneath his hood, but I felt his eyes. And I swear, I felt something colder than the autumn air. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he let go of the bag. The soft, muffled thump of it hitting the earth made my skin crawl. His hand, dirty, pale, flexed once at his side, and then he started walking toward me. Not running, walking, but it was worse than running, because there was no hurry in it, no urgency, just certainty. My body screamed, "Go!" and I obeyed. I turned and bolted, my breath tearing from my throat as my boots pounded the earth. Branches whipped at my arms and my camera bounced hard against my chest. Behind me, I heard it, the crunch of leaves, the steady thump, thump, thump of boots, too close and too heavy. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The forest was a blur, gold, brown, and shadows as I tore through it. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but adrenaline pushed me harder. I felt the ground slope, roots clawing at my boots, but I kept going. Then, the ground vanished. I hit a dip, my ankle twisting painfully as I tumbled. I slammed hard into the earth, my breath knocking out in a choked gasp. My camera skidded from my chest, landing somewhere in the brush. The world spun. Sky, leaves, sky again. I tried to push up, but pain lanced through my ankle, and I gasped. I could barely put weight on it, and then I heard him. The footsteps slowed, crunching through the brush, closer now. A shadow shifted through the trees. My throat was dry, my pulse a deafening drumbeat. I forced myself to my feet, biting down a cry as my ankle screamed. I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. I stumbled forward, crashing through the undergrowth, my body running on terror and instinct. Then, through the trees, I saw it. A road. Narrow. Empty. But a road. Hope shot through me, raw and desperate. I limped harder, faster, the tree line breaking as I burst out, my body half collapsing onto the asphalt. Please, please! The sudden roar of an engine, headlights flaring. I threw up my hands, eyes wide and wild. The brakes screamed. A pickup truck skidded to a stop just feet from where I stood, the heat from the engine washing over me. The door flew open and a man jumped out, older, with a beard and eyes wide with alarm. "Jesus Christ! You okay?" I tried to speak, my voice barely a rasp. "Someone," I gasped, "someone's..." I turned back toward the woods. The trees stood still, silent. The road behind me was empty, no footsteps, no shadow, no man, just the wind through the leaves and the cold press of unseen eyes. The police came. I told them everything, every word, every detail. They combed the woods with flashlights and radios, but they found nothing. No trail, no tarp, no footprints. Nothing except my camera. It was sitting upright on the forest floor just yards from where I fell, almost placed. The memory card was gone. The officers were polite but distant, the kind you could tell didn't believe a damn word you said. "Could have been a hunter," one of them offered. "They wear dark clothes sometimes." "Or a camper," said another. "Got spooked and ran off." I didn't argue. What was the point? But I knew, because a hunter wouldn't drag something that heavy without a cart, and a camper wouldn't watch me like that, wouldn't leave my camera behind, but take the card. I tried to sleep that night. I tried to convince myself it was over, but around 3 a.m. my phone buzzed. No caller ID. I stared at it, my heart already pounding. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. The line was silent. Then, beneath the static, a sound. A soft, rhythmic crunch. Footsteps. Then, a click. The sound of a camera shutter. I haven't been back to the forest since, but I see him sometimes, in reflections, in the shadows just beyond the tree line when I drive at night. And every so often, my phone buzzes. with a single image, a blurry shot of me. I couldn't shake Ellie's story. When I heard what happened to her out in Arkansas, the man, the tarp, the missing camera, it crawled under my skin and stayed there. She told me every detail, her voice tight and brittle, like she was still running. But the part that kept me up at night wasn't the man or the chase, it was the phone call. That single, blurry photo of her taken from his perspective. I've spent enough time in the woods to know sometimes you're not the only thing out there. Scout's paws thumped softly against the earth, steady and sure. He always led the way on our hikes, his ears up and his nose working. A Rottweiler, strong and loyal, he was the best hiking partner a guy could ask for. The Blue Ridge Mountains had been our backyard for years. Familiar, comforting, and always waiting. That day, though, something felt off. The trees were too still, their branches barely whispering despite the breeze. The air smelled different, too. Damp, metallic, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Even the birds were silent. Scout noticed it first. His usual easy trot slowed, ears pivoting toward the trees. His muscles tensed under his black and tan coat, and his tail stiffened. A clear warning. "See something, boy?" I asked, my voice soft, steady. I trusted his instincts. They'd saved me more than once. Scout's growl, deep, low, rumbled from his chest. I stopped walking. The trail ahead was empty, just a winding path of leaves and roots. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Someone was watching us. I didn't see him at first, it was just a shape, a shift between the trees. But Scout's growl sharpened, his lips pulling back to reveal his teeth. Then I saw him. A figure. He stood just off the trail, half shrouded by a thick oak trunk. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low, casting his face in shadow. His stance was unnatural, too still, too deliberate. I raised my voice, keeping it even. "Hey, you okay out here?" No answer. He didn't move, didn't even shift his weight, just stood there. Every instinct screamed wrong. I didn't like how he was positioned, just far enough off the trail to watch without being seen. Slowly, I stepped back. "Come on, Scout, let's move." I turned us down a different path. A narrow offshoot I knew led toward the ridge. A detour, but one I could navigate easily. Crunch. My heart kicked. The sound came from behind us, soft, but there. I glanced back. The man was gone. But Scout's ears were up, his gaze fixed behind us. I knew what that meant. He was following. The woods grew tighter around us, the trail closing in. I kept my pace steady, but my skin prickled with every step. Then, a rustle. From the other side of the trail, my stomach knotted. "Two?" I stopped cold, my pulse a hammer in my ears. Scout growled again, his body angled toward the brush. The leaves shifted, and another figure emerged. This one was built differently. Broader, heavier. He wore a faded work jacket, its sleeves dirty and worn. But it wasn't the clothes that stopped my breath. It was the crowbar in his hand. Adrenaline shot through me, and my voice dropped into something hard and firm. "I don't know what you two want, but you're making a mistake." The man with the crowbar didn't speak. He just stood there, his grip tightening on the metal. Behind me, another step. The first man, the one in the hoodie, had closed the distance. They were boxing me in. Scout's growl deepened, a warning that promised violence. The man in the hoodie took a step forward. His voice, when it came, was low and oily. "Nice dog." My fingers curled into fists, my voice like gravel. "You don't want to test him." His smile, cold, cold. "Maybe I do." He moved first. The man in the hoodie lunged, too fast, his hands reaching for me. But Scout was faster. With a snarl that ripped through the trees, he launched forward, his teeth sinking deep into the man's thigh. The man screamed, a raw, panicked sound, as Scout's jaws locked tight. He staggered, his legs buckling as he struggled to shake Scout loose. The crowbar, I saw it move. The second man was coming. I grabbed the nearest thing, a thick branch, and swung. Hard. The wood connected with his arm with a sickening crack. The crowbar hit the ground, and he stumbled back, cursing through clenched teeth. Blood dotted the leaves from where Scout tore into the first man's leg. "Scout!" I barked, my voice sharp with command. His ears flicked, but he held firm, his growl rattling through his chest. The man, his face twisted in agony, pulled something from his jacket. A knife. "Scout! Off!" The order snapped through the air. Scout obeyed instantly, releasing the man's leg and springing back to my side, teeth bared and ready. The man hit the ground, blood soaking through his jeans, his knife shaking in his hand. The second man, cradling his arm, froze, his eyes flicking between me, Scout, and his wounded partner. The balance had shifted, and they knew it. The man with the crowbar made his choice first. He took one step back, then another, and without a word he turned and vanished into the trees. The man on the ground, his face pale with pain, dragged himself backward, his breath ragged and sharp, his eyes locked on mine, something feral behind them. "This ain't over," he spat. I met his gaze, my voice cold as stone. "You'll wish it was." And then he turned and disappeared into the brush. I didn't move for a long second, my heart pounding, my hand still gripping the branch. The forest was silent again, but this time it felt like it was watching. The police found the blood, the footprints, even the crowbar, but not the men. They told me it was probably some vagrants or a bad robbery attempt. I didn't argue, but I knew better. Those men weren't there to rob me, they were hunting, and they weren't alone. That night, I locked every door and kept Scout close. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it finally did, I dreamed of something worse than the men. The thing I felt in the woods, watching, waiting. And something tells me it's not finished. You ever have one of those nights where sleep feels impossible? That was me after hearing Aaron's story. The way he described those two men, their silence, their precision, reminded me too much of what Ellie and James went through. Different states, different settings, but the same cold, calculated presence. Something was tying these stories together, and the thought made my skin crawl. That night, I lay in the dark, scrolling through my phone, my heart still racing from Aaron's account. And somewhere between the silence and the shadows, I found something else, a story I wish I hadn't. I've always been drawn to places most people avoid. Abandoned hospitals, shuttered factories, forgotten trails. Maybe it's the thrill, or maybe it's the silence. Out there in the middle of nowhere, there's nothing but you and the unknown. That's what drew me to Blackwater River State Forest. Miles of untouched Florida wilderness, thick with pines and cypress trees. Remote, isolated, perfect. I wasn't planning on staying overnight. The trip was supposed to be a quick solo hike and some exploring. But the place had a pull to it. Something in the way the light filtered through the moss-draped branches, the way the river whispered through the underbrush. It felt old. Older than anything I'd ever walked through. By the time I realized the sun was dipping below the trees, it was too late to head back. So I decided to camp. I didn't think anything of it. I'd camped alone plenty of times before. I didn't know this time would be different. The first part of the night was peaceful. I set up my small tent beside a clearing, close enough to the river to hear its soft babble. The air smelled damp and earthy in the forest's night chorus. I lit a small fire, cooked some beans, and enjoyed the kind of quiet you only get miles from civilization. I even filmed a short clip for my channel, just a quick pan of the forest and a thumbs up. Solo camp in Blackwater. Peaceful as hell. God, how wrong I was. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate, crunching through the leaves. I froze, my heart hammering. My eyes darted to my phone. 3:12 a.m. For a second I thought, maybe a deer? But no, these steps were too slow, too steady. Not the clumsy shuffle of an animal. The sounds circled the tent, one step, then another, a slow, methodical loop, pressing down leaves with careful weight. My throat tightened. I strained my ears, barely daring to breathe. And then, a voice. Close. Too close. Low, whispering. "Can you hear me?" My blood turned to ice. The voice wasn't loud, it was barely more than a breath. But it was right outside the thin fabric of my tent. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body had gone stiff with terror, my pulse a thunder in my ears. The voice came again, soft and sickly. Can you hear me? I felt the air shift, the presence leaning closer. And then, a sound. A soft, scraping hiss. Metal on rock. Slow, drawn out, like a blade being sharpened. I had to get out. I knew staying in the tent meant death. There was no door, no lock, just fabric. I reached for my backpack, my fingers trembling, and found my pocket knife. Small, useless, but it felt better than nothing. The footsteps stopped. Silence. But it wasn't relief, it was anticipation. I felt it, thick and heavy. I couldn't risk the front zipper. That would make too much noise. So, I did the only thing I could. I reached behind me and began to cut. The fabric of the tent split softly under the blade. My breaths came shallow, sharp. I peeled open the gap, just wide enough, and slipped out into the night. The forest swallowed me immediately. The moon barely touched the canopy. Everything was shadows and shapes. My knees sank into damp leaves as I crouched, my body pressed to the earth. I held my breath, listened. The whisper came again, but not from behind. It was to my left. Can you hear me? My heart stuttered. He had moved, fast. The scraping sound came next, closer. I gripped my knife tighter. My legs burned with adrenaline as I pushed through the underbrush, every twig snap a gunshot in my ears. My breath ripped in shallow gasps, my shirt slick with cold sweat. I wasn't running toward anything. I was running from him. The forest felt endless, every tree the same, every shadow a trap. But then, a head, a shape, a structure, a building? I stumbled into a clearing, my legs shaking beneath me. There, an old ranger station, weathered and forgotten, its windows boarded up. I sprinted to the door, my fingers scraping at the handle. Locked. Come on, I gasped, my voice shaking. The whisper, closer. Can you hear me? I circled the building, my shoulder crashing against the side door. It burst open, the wood splintering, and I stumbled inside, collapsing to the floor. Dust rose around me, thick and choking. The room was dark. Just the faintest moonlight cutting through broken boards. My chest heaved, my ears rang with my pulse. I pushed myself up, backing into a corner, knife clutched tight. I listened. Nothing. The forest outside was still, but I wasn't alone. I felt him. A soft creak, the door I had crashed through. It was closing, slowly, on its own. The air dropped, cold seeping into my bones. My breath came out in quick, panicked clouds. And then, a voice. But this time, inside the room. I know you can hear me. I didn't think. I moved. There was a window, half board but loose. I hit it hard, wood splintering as I crashed through. The forest hit me, branches slapping my face as I rolled through the underbrush. Pain screamed in my shoulder, but I kept moving. I didn't stop, didn't look back. I ran until my legs gave out. And then, headlights. A road. A car skidded to a stop, and I collapsed into the light, my voice a ragged plea. Help, the police came. They found the campsite. My tent dripped open from behind, but the ground, no footprints, not mine, not his. Like no one had been there at all. But they found one thing, a tree, carved deep into its bark. 3 words. I saw you. I never camped alone again. Hell, I barely sleep through the night anymore. Because sometimes, in the silence, I hear it. The scrape, the whisper, can you hear me? After hearing Tyler's story, I stopped camping altogether. His voice still plays in my head, the way it cracked describing that whisper outside his tent. I remember how his hands shook when he showed me the photo of the tree, the words, I saw you, carved deep into the bark. It reminded me of James's story, the men on the roadside, and Ellie's, the figure in the woods, and Aaron's, the hunters with the crowbar. Different places, different faces, but the same eyes watching from the dark. That's why I'm sharing what happened to Sophia. Because after her story, I realized this thing, whatever it isn't stopping. I met Sophia Monroe a year ago through a mutual friend. She taught 3rd grade in upstate New York, loved gardening, and spent weekends hiking the Adirondacks. The outdoors was her happy place, quiet, free from lesson plans and PTA meetings. But now, she won't even go near the woods. Sophia told me what happened during her group hike last fall. She wasn't looking for trouble, just fresh air and some photos of the changing leaves. But the forest had other plans. The day was perfect. The air smelled like earth and fallen leaves, and the sun melted through the trees in warm golden patches. Sophia had joined a hiking group, 8 people total, hoping to enjoy the Adirondack Mountains with some company. The trail started easy. Laughter, introductions, the crunch of boots on dirt, but by the time they reached the fork in the path, the group split. Some wanted the long route, some didn't. Sophia, feeling adventurous, went with the long route. The others disappeared into the woods. She didn't notice the silence at first, but it crept in. The chatter faded. The wind died. Even the birds stopped singing. The only sound, her own footsteps. The feeling started then, that itch between her shoulder blades. Someone was watching. She stopped, turning slow, her breath tight. The trail behind her, empty. The trees, still. Just her, the path, and the sky bleeding through the canopy. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It clung to her like the shadows between the trees. Then, a flicker of movement. Far back, barely visible through the trunks, a figure, a man. Wearing an old, battered hiking jacket. The color bled from too many winters. He stood perfectly still, half hidden behind the trees. Sophia's pulse quickened. She thought, maybe another hiker? But something was wrong. He wasn't walking, or resting, or lost. He was just watching. Sophia's throat went dry. She tried to shake it off. This is a public trail. People hike here. But as she moved, so did he. Not forward, not back, but with her. Keeping the same distance, the same pace, she changed direction, took a smaller path that curved sharply around the hill, but when she glanced back, he was still there. Same distance, same slow, steady presence. Her heart pounded harder. She thought, should I call out? Should I say something? But her gut screamed no. Then, his voice, low, calm, too calm. You shouldn't be here alone. Her blood turned cold. The way he said it, it wasn't advice, it was a promise. She spun around fully now, her voice tight. Who are you? The man didn't move, didn't blink, but his lips curved, just slightly. A hint of a smile. Like he knew something she didn't. Then, a snap. Behind her, the underbrush crushed. Someone else was there. Her chest seized, her mind screaming, "There's 2 of them!" Before she could move, the second figure emerged. From the trees. Bigger, broader, face hidden by the hood of a tattered sweatshirt, but she felt his eyes. Her body made the choice. She ran. Branches tore at her clothes. Her legs burned as she sprinted blindly through the woods, her breath ragged. But the footsteps. They followed, close, too close. She didn't look back, couldn't, but she felt them, one on her left, one on her right, closing in. Her pulse roared, her vision tunneled, and the ground vanished. The earth dropped. A sudden dip, and she fell. Hard. Pain exploded in her ankle, and the air shot from her lungs. She hit the forest floor in a tangle of leaves and roots, her body screaming from the impact. The footsteps stopped. Silence, but not peace, the kind of silence that waits. Then, a whisper, low, close. Where are you going? Terror surged through her. She forced her body to move, her ankles screaming with every push. She clawed through the dirt, pulling herself up. Then, a voice from somewhere ahead. "Sophia! Hey! Over here!" Her heart seized. That wasn't them. That was her group. With everything she had left, she bolted, crashing through the trees, pain be damned, and then the clearing, the familiar faces. Her group. She burst through the trees, gasping and wide-eyed. "Sophia!" someone shouted. Jesus, what happened? She couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. Her eyes, they flew back to the trees, but they were empty. No man, no hood, no anything, just the forest. Cold, still, waiting. Her voice broke, her body shaking. "Did you," she gasped. "Did you see them?" Her friend's face. Pale, confused. "See who?" Sophia's knees buckled and someone caught her, easing her down. She wanted to scream, but the trees, they kept their secret. The police searched, nothing. But the group, they told me something. When they found her, she was clutching something so hard her knuckles had gone white. A patch, torn from a jacket, old, worn, faded letters barely readable. Park ranger service. But here's the thing. The station closed down 20 years ago. And the trail? It isn't on any map. Sophia never went back to the woods, but sometimes, late at night, she says she hears it. From the trees outside her window, a voice. "You shouldn't be here, alone." After Sophia's story, I thought nothing could unnerve me more. But I was wrong, because then I found Mark's recording. It came to me from an anonymous email. No subject, no text, just an audio file labeled room_306_log_pub3. I shouldn't have listened, but I did, and now I can't unhear it. The tape starts with static, faint, crackling, then metal. Nervous. Testing. This is Mark Westfield. It's October 17th. At the Elmside Hotel, got a call for a routine electrical inspection. Whole building's dead, power's off, but something's not right. A pause, the sound of his boots on tile, the slight rattle of a tool bag. Place has been shuttered since 1985. Heard some local stories, missing people, weird noises, but I don't buy that stuff. Anyway, let's get to it. The recording shifts. His footsteps echo in a long corridor. The air seems heavy. I can hear it in his breath. Shallow, uneasy. Then, a faint hum, not from his equipment, from the walls. What the hell? There's power? But he stops. The grid's disconnected. How's... The hum sharpens, becomes something else. A voice, whispering through the static. I hear it, soft, almost playful. "Come upstairs," Mark's breath catches. "Hello?" His voice tightens. "Someone here?" Silence. Then, the building answers. "Room 306. I hear his tool bag clatter to the floor. "This some kind of prank?" he snaps, but his voice is unsteady. "I'm not playing." But the whisper, it laughs. I hear him move, faster now, his boots slapping against the dusty floor. He curses under his breath, but he's going up. The stairs creak beneath his weight. He's panting. I can feel his pulse in the shaky breaths he takes. And then, the whisper returns. But now, it's behind him. "Don't let him in." His voice cracks. "Who the hell?" Then, a thud. The tape distorts, screeches, like something hit the recorder. Then silence. When the sound returns, it's just him. Breathing, but it's wrong, it's shallow, ragged, like he's struggling. Then I hear, the door. He rasps. It's open. His voice is different, thinner, almost hollow. The door creaks on rusted hinges, and then the sound changes. The air itself freezes. His voice trembles. "Jesus, what?" The whisper returns. but not from the recorder. From the room. Soft. Insidious. Right next to his ear. I told you. The temperature drops. I hear the sudden crack of ice crystals. Then, the door slams. The whisper. Now, from the hotel intercom. Don't let him in. His scream tears through the static. Raw, human, then silence. But the tape, it keeps running. Minutes, then a different sound. Not human. A knock, soft in the inside of the door. Then a voice, but it's his. Hello? But? It's wrong. It's not him. It's too slow, too empty. Then the whisper returns, not as a voice, as a chorus, layered, hundreds, thousands, all saying, you shouldn't have left. And then the recording ends. But here's the thing, I checked the date on the audio file, October 17th. That's the same day Sophia was in the Adirondacks. And I noticed, in the background of the tape, when he's running, there's a sound. Faint. Wind, leaves, and footsteps, like someone or something was running with him. But Elmside Hotel, it's not in New York, it's in Nevada, almost 2,000 miles apart. So how could they share the same woods? And then I saw it in the audio spectrogram, buried deep, a message etched in the static, not a voice, a name. The same name carved into a tree, whispered outside a tent, murmured on a mountain road. The Hollow Man. I shut off the recording, but it was too late, because now I hear him too. Not on the tape, not from the hotel, but here, right behind me, and he's whispering behind me. And he's... As you've journeyed with me through these 6 chilling stories, from the isolated back roads and silent forests to the haunted halls of the Elmside Hotel, you've witnessed something more than just terror. You've seen how danger often lurks not in the monsters we imagine, but in the shadows of the familiar. The road you thought you knew, the trail you've walked 100 times, or the voice that sounds almost human. There's a lesson in every story. 1. Trust your instincts. When James felt something wasn't right on that desolate road, his instincts saved his life. Fear isn't weakness, it's a warning. Your gut often knows what your eyes cannot see. 2. Ellie's search. Respect the unknown. Ellie's search for the perfect shot led her into something that wasn't meant to be witnessed. Curiosity is powerful, but so is caution. Some places are meant to be left undisturbed. 3. Never underestimate loyalty. Aaron's survival wasn't just his fight, it was Scout's. Our greatest protection often comes from those who stand with us, no matter how dark the path becomes. 4. Stay calm in the face of fear. Tyler's terror was real, but his silence and quick thinking saved him from something unspeakable. Panic is natural, but composure can be your greatest shield. 5. Strength in numbers. Sophia's isolation made her a target. When she found her group, she found safety. In the face of the unknown, seek others, because together we are harder to silence. 6. Some doors should stay closed. Mark ignored every warning, and it cost him more than his way out. Curiosity is human, but some mysteries are better left unanswered. But these stories share something more than terror. They share a presence, a whisper that follows, a watcher that waits. The darkness we've explored tonight isn't just in haunted hotels or lonely trails. It's in choices, in moments where we hesitate, or worse, when we don't listen to the voice that says, run. So, what's the lesson from the vault? It's this: the unknown isn't always your enemy, but ignoring it is. And now, before the vault closes for the night, a heartfelt thank you. Thank you for unlocking these stories with me, for staying through every whisper, every footstep, every shadow. The vault wouldn't exist without you, the brave souls who dare to listen. So, if you've felt the chill, share this with someone who needs a reminder. to listen, to trust, to run when the road grows dark. And if you've ever faced something that made your blood run cold, tell us. The vault is always listening. Until next time, keep your lights close and your exits closer.